Legal expert Walter Bhengu joins me now on Newsnight to talk about the challenges of evidence given from a couple and why questions can be raised about the tailoring and consistency of their versions. Mr. Bhengu, good evening and thanks for coming in. It's a point that Roo really seemed to labour on over the last 2 days. He raised some concerns about their testimony, saying that they used the same words on the stand and ultimately accused them of tailoring their versions to match each other. Talk us through the broad rules of acquiring a couple's statement.
Whenever there's a couple that needs to make a statement, when the police come through to take their statements, they must be put in 2 separate rooms. That is why the counsel was saying that might as well have been standing together in the box saying the same thing. So the broad rules say that you must try and avoid having similar statements because of the credibility issue that comes to play, to say that did these 2 people collaborate in the way they put their statement, or do they hear different things? Because it's very important to understand that even if you're a couple, there are different things you hear. That's why, for instance, the husband was asleep when the wife was awake. So that's why the counsel was very clear to try and see if you can punch holes to see how you can see how they maybe rehearsed it when they were being prepared by their counsel.
Look, it seems natural, Mr. Bhengu, that a couple would discuss these events, particularly events as tragic as this. And I think that point was made in court because the experience has been emotional. But how far can they go? What precautions? I mean, I suppose right at the very beginning when all of this happened, they wouldn't have expected to have ultimately become witnesses in all of this. So just talk us through this delicate dance between telling the truth, giving your version, and having had a discussion about it.
I think it's very important to note that this incident happened a year ago, and from that point, they've been talking to friends together, they've been discussing what happened on that night. So as time goes on, there is a danger that their statements end up becoming similar. That is why at some point they to say, go back and read your statement, because there's certain things you said in the statement which you're not saying today because they're now inconsistencies. So I think it's something that's very important whenever counsel decides to use a couple, that they must be aware of the dangers, that because it was a year ago, things change in the way that they perceive certain things to be fact when they're not fact at all.
And as Roo says, perhaps they would have been influenced by news reports they might have seen. But I want to go a step further to another seemingly alarming development in court today when Charles spoke about the fact that all the witnesses were housed together. Is this common practice in our courts? I mean, we're learning a lot about the court process through this trial. Is that normal?
It should not be a situation that should be done. Yes, you want them to be together. Yes, you want them not to be abused by the media or maybe other people to influence them. But at the end of the day, if you put them together, they are bound to talk. They are bound to ask each other for advice. What do you think I should say? And therefore start tailoring their answers the same. Why? Because they don't want to be grilled. And I'm sure you've seen already the grilling that goes through, that a witness goes through. So at the end of the day, I think it's a dangerous precedent to have all witnesses on the same side staying together.
And judging by the way in which Roo has laboured on every single, almost minute point, this is possibly something that can come back to hurt the state's case later?
Definitely it is, because that's why sometimes people are saying, why is he continuing asking the same question over and over again? But that is a tactic, a very clever tactic, to say that, Judge, you can see that this woman or this man is not consistent in what they're saying, because at the end of the day, the facts should never change. Facts should remain consistent. But because of being questioned many times, sometimes you start second-guessing yourself and thinking, maybe I said something wrong, or maybe I wasn't prepped correctly. So definitely at the end of the day, that is going to come and assist defense more than the state.
Do you know, to your knowledge, Mr. Bhengu, whether in a situation like this, where there is a grouping of witnesses in a common space, whether there is a court official that sort of adjudicates that gathering, or a police official, or someone from the state's team? I mean, is there an independent person to make sure that what you're talking about doesn't happen, the exchanging of stories or versions?
Usually what would actually happen is that if the state has got a group of witnesses together, it's the state's duty to take care of them. So no independent individual comes in, because at the end of the day, the state doesn't want anyone interfering, even if they are perceived to be independent. So that's another danger as well, that there's no one monitoring what these individuals are doing, being housed together. So I think tactically that could have been a blunder on the state side.
As someone who is no stranger to the inner workings of a court and perhaps to some extent the way a judge can be swayed by the evidence that is brought before court, how much sway do you think, seeming contradictions or inconsistencies in versions will have on what Judge Masipa thinks?
Luckily in South Africa, we've got a system where it's only a judge and not a jury. So in terms of swaying, the judge is stricter in terms of application of the law and how evidence should sway the decision at the end of the day. Because with the jury, for instance, in America, it will be the emotions of the people. I'm sure you've seen internationally what happens when there's an outcry. But because the judge is someone who's got experience, it's someone who's been trained in the art of gathering evidence and listening to evidence, it's got a sway, but it won't be something that the judge will delve too much into in terms of inconsistencies, unless the inconsistencies are of a grave nature.
Mr. Bhengu, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Legal expert there, Walter Bhengu, here for us in Johannesburg.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com